This is the fifth video in a series of 7 helping you get that A star in your OCR A Level Women in Literature Unseen essay. In this video, we'll be looking at Charlotte Perkins Gilman's 1892 short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. I'll summarise the text for you and provide you with key quotations in the areas of women and their relationships with men, women as victims of men and/or patriarchal structures, and women in marriage. You'll also get a chance to write your own mini response to an unseen question from Edith Wharton's 1905 novel House of Mirth, plus muse over my own response afterwards.
Time now to delve into Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. I'm going to give you my summary of this groundbreaking story, and of course there'll be those quotations that you might be able to use within your exam essay.
The female narrator is spending the summer at a grand country house with her husband John and the baby. John is a brisk, cheerful, practical, no-nonsense physician, and the narrator is struggling with an illness. Exactly what the illness is not made clear, although the narrator implicitly disagrees with her husband's view that it is a temporary nervous depression. The narrator is clearly in a difficult situation. On the one hand, she longs for activity, for excitement and change. On the other hand, she knows that her husband is a renowned doctor who believes that she needs rest and quiet to help her convalescence. On the one hand, she knows that her husband loves her in his own way and is openly affectionate. On the other hand, she knows that she cannot fully confide in him and that he doesn't really understand her. So she spends an increasing amount of time in their bedroom and becomes increasingly preoccupied by the yellow wallpaper. She begins to look closely at the patterns, the way there are sections stripped off, the almost revolting colour. Soon she hates it. Meanwhile, her mental health deteriorates. When she confides in John with her concerns about the room and the wallpaper, he laughs at her. But this apparently is to be expected within marriage. Her baby is scarcely mentioned or even given a name and has been predominantly looked after by John's sister. Over time, she spies crawling, impertinent eyes within the wallpaper, which, over more time, become like a human figure. She cries most of the time, although only when alone. She stops attempting to confide in her husband altogether, but her energy levels continue to plummet. And she spends more and more time staring at the wallpaper, whose pattern evolves in her mind to show a woman. The narrator takes it upon herself, detective-esque, to study the pattern, particularly during the night. The wallpaper emits a peculiar smell too, and then the narrator discovers that the female figure in the wallpaper shakes the patterns. And then she discovers that this female figure actually gets out in the daytime and creeps around the surrounding countryside. On her last night in the house, the narrator pulls off all the wallpaper, locks the door, and throws the key outside the window. She has managed to squirrel away a rope which can potentially be used to tie up the female figure who she originally located within the wallpaper. Outside the windows, she sees scores of female figures creeping around and associates herself with them. Like herself, they came out of the wallpaper. Disturbed, panic-stricken, her husband bangs on their locked bedroom door. But of course the key is outside the house on the ground. When he enters the room, he sees his wife creeping around. She tells him that she's finally got out of the wallpaper, and, as it has all been stripped from the wall, he won't be able to put her back in. He faints. There are some great quotations within this short story. What about this one from the 6th sentence of the whole story, which I've positioned under the theme of women and marriage? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. One of the distinctive features of this short story is just how short and sparse the paragraphs are. A huge number consist of just one sentence, and many have just a couple. These incredibly short paragraphs help create an appropriately fragmentary feel to the narrative and highlight the lack of fluidity and action within the narrator's life, which of course would appear to be the significant contributing factor in relation to her mental health difficulties. Within this quotation and paragraph, it is the casual way the narrator drops in the fact that women being laughed at, not taken seriously, is to be expected within marriage, which is most striking and devastating. The sentence consists of a compound sentence. And the fact that depressing, matter-of-fact statement about the realities of marriage is made within a full main clause makes it stand out all the more starkly. No further comment or elaboration is given. The subservient position of women within marriage, the failure to be genuinely listened to and credited, is written as a simple, plain fact. I don't know why I should write this, but I must say what I feel and think in some way. It is such a relief. This quotation builds on the ideas from the first one, which is that within marriage in general, or within the narrator's marriage, or both, the woman feels that her voice is not listened to, she is unheard, and thus the importance of writing. It allows her to express herself, to vent some of her feelings and emotions. Writing can be, to some extent, therapeutic for the trapped, confined, ununderstood married woman. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he is so wise and because he loves me so. I think this quotation helps reset the balance in an important way because actually John probably does love his wife and probably does think that he's doing the right thing with his prescribed course of treatment. The laughing from the first quotation is intended to be light-hearted, even if the effect is unintentionally to make his wife feel less valued and understood. However, what we see with this quotation is that the narrator is up against two giant hurdles in her quest to have her voice heard: the perceived superior wisdom of both the male and the medical expert. And it's not that either of these two more powerful voices are malignly intentioned. John is so wise and loves the narrator so. However, the net result remains that the narrator's difficulties are compounded due to her perspectives and views not being genuinely listened to. Life becomes so much harder because of this. Now onto the theme of women as victims of men and/or patriarchal structures. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. This is not just an example of a woman being a victim of men or patriarchal structures, but also the relative medical ignorance of the time in terms of effective treatment for mental illness. It was genuinely felt that lolling around and doing very little would be helpful for depression and anxiety, whereas nowadays we recognise that treatments such as cognitive behavioural therapy and having meaningful occupations can be crucial in the recovery of the patient. However, a key point here is that in the 19th century, it would be the absolute norm for women of the middle upper classes to be largely confined to the domestic sphere. The home would be where women could reign supreme, be content to bless, animate and blow beneficence amongst the four walls. This grossly oversimplified stereotype makes it even harder for the narrator to get her viewpoint across. When a woman's natural habitat, as perceived by society, is the peaceful, quiet environment of the home, why on earth would this not be the same place where she's going to make a pleasing recovery from a mere temporary nervous depression? There comes John, and I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. Here we see yet another example of men smothering and seeking to control women through well-intentioned, misguided, ignorant kindness. John, as an eminent physician and a man, has the authority to know what is best. The female voice may be witted, but will not be listened to. The male doctor knows. Never mind that it results in the woman effectively being treated like a child, and indeed later in the story he even refers to her as little girl. He says that with my imaginative power and habit of story making, a nervous weakness like mine is sure to lead to all manner of excited fancies, that I ought to use my will and good sense to check the tendency. The context here is that the narrator has mentioned to her husband that she fancies she sees people walking within a beautiful shaded lane that runs from the bay to the house. What I find interesting here is that imaginative power and habit of story making are implicitly seen as a potential force for harm, particularly when opposed to the stereotypically male, qualities of will and good sense. Creativity is not to be valued or channeled in order to stimulate, but clipped, curtailed in favour of good discipline and vigorous self-moderation. Thinking back to Plath's The Bell Jar, this feels like something dull conformist Buddy Willard would say to Esther Greenwood. Now on to the theme of women and their relationships with men. First up is a woman in literature classic. "What is it, little girl?" he said. On the one hand, genuine affection runs through the use of the term of endearment. But on the other hand, it unintentionally demeans and implies lack of maturity and a suffocating lack of agency, given that children must do what their elders tell them to do. To paraphrase Jane Eyre, what the narrator should respond with is the fact that she isn't a little girl, but rather a free human being with an independent will, which she now exerts to start using her own judgment in terms of what may improve her mental health. She does try to speak and asks whether they might be able to leave the house before the end of the 3-month lease, but this is not practical, and John has plenty of practical reasons to explain why. "Bless her little heart," he said with a big hug. "She shall be as sick as she pleases." This is later within the same exchange, and once again we see a man being incredibly patronising to a woman, a husband being gloriously, affectionately condescending to his wife, as seen particularly in the initial exclamatory phrase and the use of the third person. The implication is that to some extent his wife is playing a game with her mental illness, is stringing it along as some kind of whim. The trouble is, this simply isn't true, and his failure to listen to his wife and treat her as a fully functioning adult plays a significant role in her dramatic decline. And finally, "I lie down ever so much now. John says it is good for me, and to sleep all I can. Indeed, he started the habit by making me lie down for an hour after each meal." Here's another example of male desire to control women, even down to small details, to add to your collection. After every meal, irrespective of how the narrator is feeling, she must go to lie down, perhaps conveniently avoiding the need to make conversation while the man enjoys his coffee or brandy. And here we see very clearly the negative consequences of such pernickety male management of female behaviour, female stagnation, inertia, and ultimately decline. Time for another one of these, but this time, as well as showing a superb understanding of the passage and the language, form and structure, weave in a cheeky little reference to the Yellow Wallpaper. Get on with it, press pause. Here's my response. Within this passage, Lily talks frankly about the differences between the lives of men and women. Whereas the former have more choices and freedom, women must marry and prioritise their appearance above all else, irrespective of the cost. She tells an irritatingly amused Selden, a girl must marry, a man may if he chooses. The modal verb used, must, makes it clear that for a woman marriage is essential for her future survival, whereas for a man it is more like a lifestyle choice. He may marry. Lily also goes into detail when emphasising the critical importance of a woman's appearance when it comes to remaining part of the social scene, which presumably represents her best chance of securing a prosperous partnership. "We are expected to be pretty and well dressed till we drop," she tells Selden. There is something particularly ominous and not fully explained about the use of the verb drop. The implication may be that the pressure for women to keep on spending money on clothing may ultimately both exhaust them and cause their financial ruin. As with many 19th or early 20th century women in literature texts, what we are seeing here is that marriage for women has little to do with romantic inclination and everything to do with financial survival, something the likes of Mrs. Bennet is all too aware of in Pride and Prejudice. However, what this passage also shows is that men can fail to take female concerns seriously or genuinely listen to the female perspective. Following this particularly frank, stark avowal, Selden looks on with amusement. This noun sums up male detachment and lack of empathy when it comes to engaging with key issues for women. Just as John in the Yellow Wallpaper half listens to his wife's concerns before effectively dismissing them with glib phrases such as "bless her little heart," so here Selden is unable to offer any genuine support to his female counterparts. Do discuss or spend a few moments pondering, comparing to your own response.